The cold was endless. It had no beginning and no end. It simply was, like death itself, patient and eternal. Valith could not remember the last time she had felt warm. Her silver scales, once bright like morning stars, had turned gray and dull. Ice had formed between them, cracking her skin whenever she tried to move. She had stopped trying to move a long time ago. Beside her, connected by the same terrible chains, her brother Kareth lay motionless. His crimson scales had faded to a sick brown color, like dried blood on old bandages. His wings, once powerful enough to create storms, hung broken and twisted against his back. The chains had done that. The chains had done everything. They were on an asteroid, a frozen rock spinning through empty space, far from any sun, far from any warmth, far from any hope. The Dominion had put them here. The Dominion had decided that death was too quick, too kind for dragons who refused orders. 17 cycles. That was how long they had been chained to this rock. 17 cycles of watching the stars spin overhead, feeling their fire fade, feeling their bodies slowly shut down. Dragons were immortal creatures. They could live for thousands of years. But immortality meant nothing when you could not die, but could still suffer. The chains were special. They were made from metal pulled from dead stars, forged in fires hotter than dragon breath. They did not just hold the dragons in place. They drained them. Every day, every hour, every moment, the chains pulled the fire from their bodies and fed it into nothing. The fire simply vanished, like water poured into sand. Valith remembered fire. She remembered what it felt like to breathe and create light. She remembered flying through the hearts of suns, bathing in plasma, laughing as stars exploded around her. Dragons were creatures of fire. Fire was not just their weapon. It was their soul, their heart, their very being. Now she felt only cold. She had not spoken to Korath in 3 cycles. What was there to say? They had already said everything. They had already apologized, already forgiven, already mourned, already accepted. Now they simply waited for the end that would not come. The wind howled across the asteroid's surface. It was not real wind, not like on planets with air. It was particles of ice and dust, thrown up by the asteroid's rotation, cutting across everything like tiny knives. Valith had stopped feeling the cuts long ago. Her scales were too damaged, her nerves too frozen. She closed her eyes. She dreamed of fire, though even her dreams had grown cold. Then something changed. At first, Valith thought she was imagining it. Her mind had played tricks on her before. In the early cycles, she had seen rescue ships that were not there. She had heard voices calling her name from empty space. Madness was a companion on this frozen rock, always waiting, always whispering. But this was different. She opened her eyes and looked toward the horizon. The asteroid was small, barely 100 kilometers across, but the terrain was rough with ice formations and frozen cliffs. Against this white and gray landscape, she saw movement. A shape, small, walking. Valith's heart, which she had thought frozen solid, gave a weak beat. "Brother," she said. Her voice came out as a croak, a sound like breaking ice. She had not used it in so long. "Brother, do you see?" Korath did not move at first. Then, slowly, with effort that seemed to cost him everything he had left, he raised his great head. His eyes, once burning with inner flame, now flickered like dying candles. "I see nothing," he said. His voice was worse than hers, rough and broken. "Only ice. Only death. Look." Valith forced her neck to turn, forced her head to point. "There, moving." Korath followed her gaze. For a long moment, he was silent. Then his eyes widened, and something like life flickered in their depths. The shape was getting closer. It was walking through the blizzard of ice particles as if it was taking a pleasant morning walk. It was small, impossibly small compared to the dragons. It stood on two legs. It wore some kind of covering on its body, thick and dark against the white snow. It was not wearing a spacesuit. This was wrong. Nothing could survive on this asteroid without protection. The cold alone would kill most creatures in minutes. The lack of proper atmosphere would kill them even faster. Yet this thing walked calmly through conditions that should have been instant death. "What is it?" Korath whispered. Valith watched the figure approach. It was close enough now that she could make out details. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. A face, though she could not see its features yet. A pack on its back, straps over its shoulders. Then the figure stopped, about 30 meters away. It raised one hand and pushed back the covering on its head. Valith saw a face. Flat, with soft skin. 2 small eyes that looked right at her without fear. Dark hair, cut short. A mouth that curved upward at the corners. A human. Valith felt something she had not felt in 17 cycles. Confusion, shock, and underneath those feelings, buried so deep she almost did not recognize it, hope. Humans were small creatures, fragile, short-lived. They had barely discovered fire when dragons were already ancient. They had spread across the galaxy in recent centuries, but they were still considered a young species, unimportant in the great games of empires and dominions. They were also the species that the Dominion had ordered Valith and Korath to destroy. The dragons had refused. They had seen the human colonies, seen the families, seen the children. They had been ordered to burn it all to ash. And for the first time in their long lives, they had said no. The Dominion had not forgiven them. Now a human stood before them, alive on an asteroid that should have killed it instantly. The human took a step forward, then another. It moved without fear, without hesitation. "Hello," the human said. Its voice was warm, somehow warm even in this frozen hell. "My name is David Park. I have been looking for you for a very long time." Valith stared at this impossible creature. Words formed in her throat, but they would not come out. Korath spoke instead, his voice filled with disbelief. "Human, you cannot be here. You should be dead." David Park smiled. It was a strange expression, soft and sad at the same time. "I get that a lot," he said. "But I am here, and I am going to get you out of those chains." The wind howled. The ice cut. And for the first time in 17 cycles, Valith felt something other than cold. She felt the smallest spark of fire, deep in her frozen heart. David Park was not supposed to be here. He knew this better than anyone. 3 years ago, he had been a simple data analyst working for a shipping company on Mars. He had a wife named Lisa, a daughter named Emma, and a small house with a garden where he grew tomatoes that never quite tasted right. His life was ordinary. His life was safe. Then he had found the files. It was an accident. A corrupted database, a wrong search term, and suddenly he was looking at documents that the Dominion had tried to erase. Documents about dragons. Documents about slavery. Documents about 2 creatures who had chosen chains and death rather than burn innocent people. David had not been able to forget what he read. Now he stood on a frozen asteroid, looking at 2 dying dragons, and he wondered if his wife had been right. Lisa had told him not to go. She had begged him. She had cried and shouted, and finally gone quiet in that terrible way that meant she had accepted something she hated. "You will die," she had said the night before he left. "Maybe," David had answered, "but I have to try." He walked toward the dragons, his boots crunching on ice that sparkled like broken glass. The cold was intense. Even with his genetic modifications, he could feel it trying to kill him. His skin had been altered to handle extreme temperatures. His blood carried special proteins that stopped it from freezing. His lungs could pull oxygen from almost nothing, but there were limits. Even modified humans had limits. David could already feel his body fighting a battle it would eventually lose. He had maybe 48 hours before the cold won. The dragons watched him approach. They were enormous, even lying down. Each one was bigger than the transport shuttle he had parked behind the nearest ice ridge. Their scales, though faded and damaged, still held hints of their former glory. Silver and crimson, starlight and fire. They were beautiful, David thought. Even dying, they were the most beautiful things he had ever seen. He stopped about 10 meters away. The chains that held them were massive, each link as big as David's torso. They wrapped around the dragons' bodies, pinning their wings, binding their legs, circling their necks like metal collars. The chains glowed faintly with a dark light, and David could feel something wrong about them, something that made his teeth ache. "I know who you are," David said. His voice was steady. He had practiced this speech many times. "You are Valeth the Silver Star. You are Korath the Crimson Wind. 17 cycles ago, the Dominion ordered you to attack human colonies in the Outer Reach. You refused. They sentenced you to eternal imprisonment." The silver dragon, Valeth, stared at him with eyes like frozen mercury. "You know our names. You know our crime." Her voice was weak, but there was something in it. Something that might have been curiosity. "Why are you here, little human?" David reached into his pack and pulled out a tool. It was a plasma cutter, military grade, strong enough to cut through ship armor. He had spent everything he had to buy it on the black market. "I am here to free you," he said. Korath made a sound. It might have been a laugh, but it came out as a cough, dry and painful. "Free us with that toy?" These chains were forged in neutron star fire. "Your little light will not even scratch them." "Actually, it will." David walked to the nearest chain and knelt beside it. "I spent 2 years researching these chains. They are strong, yes, but they have a weakness. They were designed to drain dragon fire. Human plasma operates on a different frequency. It will take time, but I can cut through them." He activated the cutter. Blue light sprang to life, hot and bright. He pressed it against the first link of Valeth's chains. Sparks flew. The metal resisted for a moment, then began to glow red. It was working. "This is impossible," Valeth whispered. "Humans are good at impossible things," David said. He did not look up from his work. "We are stubborn. We do not know when to quit. Most species think this makes us stupid. Maybe they are right." The plasma cutter screamed as it bit into the neutron star metal. David felt heat on his face, but he did not move. His hands were steady. His heart was not. "Why?" Korath asked. His voice had changed. The mockery was gone, replaced by something else. Something like confusion. "We burned your people. Not you, not your colonies, but others. We were weapons of the Dominion for centuries. We killed millions, and then you stopped." David looked up for just a moment. "When it mattered most, when the Dominion ordered you to destroy everything I love, you said no. You could have saved yourselves. You could have obeyed and lived free. Instead, you chose to suffer for people you had never met." He returned to cutting. "That means something. That means everything." Minutes passed. The first link began to weaken. David's arms were getting tired, and he could feel the plasma cutter heating up in his hands. It would need to cool down soon. He would need to rest. But every moment he rested was a moment the dragons continued to suffer. He kept cutting. "You are burning yourself," Valeth said suddenly. "Your hands. I can smell it." David glanced at his palms. She was right. The heat from the cutter was starting to burn through his gloves. He could see red marks forming on his skin. "It does not matter," he said. "It matters to me." Velith's voice was soft. "You are hurting yourself to save us." "Why? What do you gain from this?" David thought about the question. He thought about Lisa and Emma. He thought about his small house and his tomatoes that never tasted right. He thought about the files he had found, the documents that had kept him awake at night, the knowledge that somewhere in the cold dark, two beings were suffering for doing the right thing. "I gain nothing," he said finally. "But some things are not about gaining. Some things are about what is right. You saved my people. Now I save you. That is how it should work. That is how it has to work, or nothing means anything." The first link broke. It fell to the ice with a sound like thunder. David looked at the dragons. He looked at the hundreds of links still remaining. He looked at his burned hands and felt the cold creeping deeper into his bones. "This will take a while," he said. "But I am not leaving until you are free." Korath stared at him. For a long moment, the great dragon said nothing. Then, slowly, he lowered his head until his eye was level with David. "You are either the bravest creature I have ever met," Korath said, "or the most foolish." David smiled. "My wife says there is no difference." He raised the plasma cutter and began work on the next link. The wind howled. The cold pressed in. And David Park, ordinary human, impossible man, kept cutting. He had promised to free them. He would keep that promise or die trying. 14 hours. David had been cutting for 14 hours. His plasma cutter had overheated 6 times. Each time, he had waited for it to cool, sitting in the snow with his burned hands pressed against the ice. The cold helped with the pain. It also made his fingers turn white and stiff. He had lost feeling in 3 of his fingers around hour 6. By hour 10, he could no longer close his left hand properly. By hour 12, the skin on his palms had started to crack and bleed, mixing with the burns to create something that looked more like raw meat than human flesh. He kept cutting. Velith watched him work. She had been watching for 14 hours, and she still did not understand. In her long life, she had seen many things. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had seen stars born and die. She had seen cruelty that would make the coldest hearts weep. But she had never seen anything like this human. He was so small. His body was so fragile. Every time the plasma cutter kicked back or the cold wind hit him, she expected him to fall, to give up, to admit that this was too much. But he never did. He just kept going, link after link, chain after chain. He was killing himself. She could see it clearly. His movements were getting slower. His breathing was getting shallow. The cold was eating him from the outside while the work ate him from the inside. He would not survive much longer, and yet he smiled. Every time he looked at her, every time their eyes met, he smiled like there was nowhere else he would rather be. The last chain fell away. It hit the ice with a crash that echoed across the frozen landscape. David stood back, swaying on his feet. His face was pale, almost blue. Ice had formed in his hair and on his eyebrows. His lips were cracked and bleeding. "Done," he said. His voice was a whisper now. "You are free." Velith tried to move. After 17 cycles of being bound, she had almost forgotten what freedom felt like. Her muscles screamed in protest. Her joints cracked and popped. Pain shot through her body like lightning. But she was moving. She was actually moving. Beside her, Korath tried to stand. He got halfway up before his legs gave out, and he collapsed, sending up a spray of snow and ice. He roared in frustration and pain, but there was something else in that roar too. Something like joy. "We cannot walk," Velith said. The truth hurt to admit. "Our bodies have been damaged too badly. We cannot fly. We cannot even stand." David nodded. He did not seem surprised. "I know. That is why I called for help." There is a ship coming. Human medical vessel. They have equipment that might help. He paused. It will take some time to arrive. A week, maybe more. A week? Korath's voice was sharp. You expect us to survive a week like this? You expect yourself to survive? David sat down in the snow. He sat right next to Valith, close enough to touch her scales if he reached out. He pulled his burned hands close to his body and shivered. I have supplies, he said. Food, water, heating packs. He paused. I do not actually know what dragons eat. The files did not say. Fire, Valith answered. We eat fire. We consume energy, heat, light. It is what we are made of. She looked at him with tired eyes. There is no fire here. There has been no fire for 17 cycles. David was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pack and pulled out a small device. It was a portable heater, the kind humans used on camping trips. He turned it on, and a weak orange flame appeared. It is not much, he said, but maybe it will help. Valith stared at the tiny flame. It was nothing. It was barely enough to warm a human hand. To a dragon, it was like offering a single drop of water to someone dying of thirst, but it was something. It was more than nothing. She leaned her great head down and breathed in the heat. It was so small, so weak, but she felt it. She actually felt warmth for the first time in 17 cycles. Tears formed in her eyes. She had not known that dragons could cry in the cold. Tell me about yourself, she said suddenly. Tell me about your life. Tell me about your home. David looked surprised. Then he nodded. He pulled his coat tighter around himself and began to speak. He told her about Earth, the planet where his ancestors had lived. He told her about Korea, a small country where his grandparents had been born, where the mountains were green and the food was spicy and people worked hard and loved harder. He told her about moving to Mars, about meeting Lisa, about the first time he saw his daughter, Emma, and how he cried harder than he had ever cried in his life. He told her about Emma now, 7 years old with her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness. He told her about how Emma wanted to be an astronaut, how she built little rockets out of cardboard and tape, how she made him promise to bring back a star for her collection. I promised her a star, David said. His voice was getting weaker, but he kept talking. I do not think I can bring her an actual star. But maybe, when you are free, you can meet her. She would love to meet a real dragon. Valith listened. She listened to every word, every detail, every memory. This small creature, this fragile human, was sharing his entire life with her. He was giving her pieces of himself, even as the cold took pieces of his body. She did not understand why. She had done nothing to earn this kindness. She had spent centuries as a weapon, a tool of destruction. The only good thing she had ever done was refuse one order, and that refusal had led to this frozen prison. But David did not seem to care about any of that. He saw her differently. He saw something worth saving. You are strange, Valith said when David finally fell silent. All humans are strange. You are small and weak, and you live such short lives. But you care so much. You feel so deeply. You burn brighter than any dragon I have ever known. David laughed. It was a weak sound, but genuine. We have to burn bright. We do not have long to do it. The wind picked up again. David shivered violently, and Valith saw that his lips were turning blue. Without thinking, she moved her body closer to him, blocking the wind with her bulk. What are you doing? David asked. You saved me, Valith said. Let me protect you from the wind. It is not much, but it is something. David smiled. He leaned against her scales, and even though they were cold and damaged, she felt him relax. Thank you, he whispered. They sat there together, human and dragon, waiting for rescue. The cold pressed in from all sides. The stars wheeled overhead in their endless dance. And somewhere in the distance, a ship was coming. Valeth did not know if they would survive. She did not know if the ship would arrive in time, or if David's body would give out, or if the Dominion would find them first. But she knew one thing. She was not alone anymore. And that made all the difference. The Dominion ship appeared on the third day. David saw it first. He was sitting against Valeth's side, sharing body heat that neither of them really had to give, when a new star appeared in the sky. Except this star was moving. This star was getting bigger. "They found us," he said quietly. Korath lifted his head. His eyes, which had started to regain some of their fire in the past days, now burned with something darker. Fear, anger, hatred. "Dominion cruiser," he said. "I recognize the design. It is a Hunter class, built to track down escaped prisoners." The ship descended slowly, like a predator playing with its food. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of David's small shuttle. Weapons covered every surface, sleek and deadly, designed to destroy planets. A voice crackled from the ship, broadcast on all frequencies. It was cold and mechanical, without any warmth or feeling. "Attention. Human vessel detected. You are interfering with Dominion property. The Dragon units designated Valeth and Korath are prisoners of the Dominion Empire. They are to be returned to custody immediately." David stood up. His legs were shaky, and his body was weaker than it had ever been. He had not eaten properly in 3 days. The cold had taken most of his strength. The burns on his hands had become infected despite his best efforts, but he stood anyway. "Property," he said, his voice bitter. "They call you property. We are nothing to them," Valeth said. "We never were. We were tools, weapons, things to be used and discarded." "Human," the broadcast continued. "You have 10 minutes to surrender the assets and depart. If you fail to comply, you will be destroyed along with them. This is your only warning." David walked forward. He walked away from the dragons, toward the ship, his boots crunching on ice that sparkled in the cruiser's lights. He stopped in an open area, clearly visible to the ship's sensors and cameras. Then he pulled out his communicator and pressed the transmit button. "No," he said. The word hung in the air. It was a small word, just 2 letters, but it carried the weight of everything David believed. There was silence from the ship. Then the voice returned, and this time there was something in it. Confusion, maybe. Or disbelief. "Repeat your response, human." I said no. David's voice was calm and clear. "These dragons are not your property. They are not assets. They are living beings who made a choice. They chose to protect innocent people instead of following your orders. That makes them heroes. That makes them better than you will ever be. You do not understand your situation, human. Our weapons can destroy this entire asteroid. You cannot stop us. You cannot fight us. You are one small creature against the might of the Dominion Empire. I know." David looked up at the ship. He thought about Lisa. He thought about Emma. He thought about the promise he had made to bring back a star. "I know I cannot win," he said. "I know you can kill me whenever you want. But I am not moving. I am not leaving. And I am definitely not giving you these dragons." "Why?" The voice sounded genuinely confused now. "Why would you die for creatures you just met? What do you gain?" David almost laughed. It was the same question Valeth had asked him. It seemed like no one in the galaxy understood humans. "Because it is right," he said. "Because 17 cycles ago, these dragons had a choice between their own safety and the lives of strangers, and they chose strangers. Now I have the same choice, and I am making the same decision." Behind him, Korath made a sound. It might have been a sob, or a laugh, or something in between. "Human," the dragon said. "David, You will die. Probably. David did not turn around. But there are things worth dying for. The cruiser's weapons began to glow. David could see the energy building, the lights getting brighter. He had seen recordings of Dominion ships firing. He knew what that glow meant. He did not run. You are making a mistake, the broadcast warned. No, David said. I am making a choice. The ship fired. David saw the plasma bolt racing toward him. It was beautiful in a terrible way, a stream of pure destruction that would end everything in an instant. He thought about closing his eyes, but decided against it. If he was going to die, he wanted to see it coming. But before the bolt reached him, his hand found something in his pocket. A small device. A prototype that his friend had given him before he left Mars. Emergency shield, his friend had said. Experimental, untested, might work, might explode. Do not use unless you have no other choice. David pressed the button. A sphere of light appeared around him, blue and bright. The plasma bolt hit it with a sound like thunder, like the end of the world. The shield flickered. It cracked. It began to fail, but it held. For 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. 3 seconds was all they needed. Because in those 3 seconds, Korath remembered who he was. The dragon rose to his feet. His legs trembled. His wings were still broken, still useless. But his eyes were burning now, truly burning, with a fire that had been dormant for 17 cycles. The fire had never left him. It had been suppressed, drained, frozen, but it was still there, deep inside, waiting. Korath opened his mouth and screamed. What came out was not sound. It was light. It was heat. It was fury older than stars and hotter than suns. It was everything the chains had taken from him, everything the cold had stolen, everything he had been forced to forget. Dragon fire. The plasma bolt dissolved. The energy just vanished, swallowed by something greater, something purer. The fire continued, a stream of impossible destruction that raced toward the cruiser. Beside Korath, Valeth felt her brother's flame. And she remembered too. She rose. Her body screamed in pain, but she ignored it. Her wings could not lift her, but she did not need to fly. She just needed to burn. She opened her mouth and added her fire to his 2 dragons. Broken, starved, left to die. But still dragons. Still creatures of fire and light and ancient power. The cruiser's shields activated. They held for exactly 47 seconds. Then they did not. The explosion was bright enough to see from orbit. The wreckage scattered across the asteroid's surface, burning even in the cold void. Pieces of metal and technology reduced to nothing by fire that had been building for 17 cycles. When it was over, Valeth and Korath collapsed. The fire had taken everything they had left. They lay in the snow, barely breathing, completely empty, but alive. Still alive, David was not so lucky. The shield had saved him from the initial blast. But when the dragons had unleashed their fire, the backlash had washed over him. His small human body had taken damage that would have killed anyone else instantly. He lay in the snow, half his body burned. His breathing shallow and weak, but he was smiling. Told you, he whispered as Valeth crawled toward him, dragging her exhausted body across the ice. Worth it. Valeth reached him. She lowered her great head until it rested next to his broken form. She could feel his heartbeat, weak but steady. He was alive. Barely, but alive. You foolish human, she said, and her voice cracked with emotion she had not felt in centuries. You impossible, stubborn, foolish human. David's smile widened just a little. My wife says the same thing. Then he closed his eyes, and Valeth waited. Her body wrapped around him, protecting him from the cold, hoping that the rescue ship would come in time, hoping that she would not lose the first friend she had made in 17 cycles.